Right. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all for being here. You'll see that some people are introducing themselves in the chat. Please feel free to get involved and get in the conversation today and utilize that chat function. We welcome you to the 5th annual edition of Metaverse Safety Week. Metaverse Safety Week is a global awareness campaign created by XRSI, X Reality Safety Intelligence, that brings together diverse stakeholders to embrace change and enable safe adoption of new technologies in our evolving digital world. As immersive technologies and AI continue to reshape our reality, Metaverse Safety Week 2024 focuses on proactively addressing emerging challenges while harnessing transformative opportunities. From human rights and healthcare to education and governments, we're fostering collaborative dialogues to build resilient frameworks that protect individuals while promoting responsible innovation. Through strategic global community labs, we create actionable insights that help shape an open, safe, and inclusive metaverse for all. My name is Elizabeth Rothman. I am XRSI's Senior Legal Affairs and Digital Trust Advisor and the moderator for this track. I am thrilled to guide our discussions today. I have a couple of co-chairs as well that I will introduce in a few moments. I am proud to introduce X Reality Safety Intelligence, or XRSI, as the organizer of this award-winning safety campaign, Metaverse Safety Week. XRSI's mission is to pioneer the establishment of robust data, privacy, safety, and security standards and certifications for the emerging tech industries. Today, this global community lab on governance and policy, we focus on policy and governance implications of open foundation AI models. This is the final day. This final day emphasizes the integration of open foundation models into the metaverse. We face the dual challenge of harnessing transformative opportunities while addressing pressing risks such as misinformation, privacy vulnerabilities, and governance complexities. Open models promise to democratize access to advanced technologies, driving innovation and creativity across decentralized systems. However, they also demand robust frameworks for safety, accountability, and ethical oversight. So building on our conversations from last year's discussions around trade secrets and their role in limiting AI transparency, this year shifts focus to the practical implication of openness. The dialogue surrounding open versus closed AI models are particularly urgent as they influence how governance frameworks evolve for the metaverse. Open models emphasize collaboration and accessibility, fostering innovation and transparency, while closed models prioritize proprietary control and security. Both approaches present trade-offs that must be carefully balanced through adaptive governance strategies. At the same time, the architecture of AI models plays a pivotal role. Beyond openness and closeness of models, architectural decisions such as how models process data, how they interact with other systems, and how they adhere to technical standards impact safety, transparency, and interoperability. Establishing governance standards for open systems, fostering multi-stakeholder cooperation, and defining ethical frameworks for these choices are key objectives for this session. And I'll go through those objectives again as we start out our session today. So by drawing actionable insights from the experts on today's call, our discussions aim to continue to chart a path forward to a secure and inclusive metaverse ecosystem. So we'll hear from policymakers, developers, platform providers, and users to really collaborate and ensure that open foundation AI models not only drive innovation, but also uphold strong protections, ethical principles, and shared accountability. So I am joined today by my co-chairs for this track, Nandita Narla and Kavya Perlman, as well as several volunteers and staff who are graciously running the show for us behind the scenes. So to coordinate today's session, I'd like to highlight a few of these members. So as I mentioned, the moderators will be myself, Kavya Perlman, and Nandita Narla. We have a timekeeper, Khalid, with us, Unanimous AI representative, Chris Hornspostel, and the event director, Banojit Chaudhry, who has been just instrumental in this entire week of programming. So all of the collective input from this session, so whether speakers or from the chat, or if you chime in to comment at any point, will be aggregated together into a post-event report, which will be published sometime in January. And so it's a really great opportunity, even if you are not speaking today, if you have thoughts, if you have comments, if you have links to reports or things that you think are important in this conversation, please add them to the chat. And that way we can take all of that information into account when we're putting together that post-event report. Okay. And then really important, a big thank you to our lead sponsor, Meta, for sponsoring this event for the 4th year in a row to ensure that it remains accessible and free to participate. Meta builds technologies that help people connect, find communities, and grow businesses. Meta is moving beyond 2D screens into immersive experiences in the metaverse, helping to create the next evolution of social technology. Giving people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. Meta's focus will be to bring the metaverse to life and to help people connect, find communities, and grow businesses. The metaverse will feel like a hybrid of today's online social experiences, sometimes expanded into 3 dimensions or projected into the physical world. We'd also like to thank Unanimous AI, our AI platform for the Community Lab, ThinkScape, and Swarm sessions. Unanimous AI amplifies intelligence of networked human groups, enabling significantly more accurate forecasts, assessments, decisions, brainstorms, evaluations, prioritizations, insights, and we are delighted to partner with them for this event. We are truly grateful to our team of advisors, volunteers, and chairs who worked all week to curate an impactful agenda, and our community partners for their active contributions and observations. Throughout the week, we brought together experts, thought leaders, and enthusiasts to explore and address challenges and opportunities presented by the metaverse. Before I turn it over to my co-host, Nandita Narla, I would like to share the key objectives for today again for this final day of Metaverse Safety Week, focused on governance and policy. I think we're going to bring them up onto the screen. There we go. Okay, so the first one is to define practical governance standards for open systems. And here we are exploring how to design governance models that promote innovation while ensuring enforceable safety and privacy standards for decentralized metaverse systems. Second, we will dive deeply into effective multi-stakeholder cooperation and open foundation models and discover strategies to assign clear responsibilities and build trust among diverse stakeholders in open foundation AI governance. And the final objective for the day is to evaluate open versus closed AI models for effective metaverse governance. We'll explore actionable insights to balance the opportunities and risks of open versus closed AI models, shaping ethical and adaptive governance strategies. Well, thank you all so much again for being here today. Please utilize the chat function throughout this entire program. Anytime that you have something you want to add, if it's not the right time to chime in personally, just add it into the chat and it'll be there. For now, I'm going to hand it over to my co-host, Nandita Narla, to introduce herself and the next portion of the program.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome everyone. I am Nandita Rao Narla. I am the Standards Chair at Institute of Operational Privacy Design and also an advisor to XRSI. Please allow me to provide you with a brief overview of what to expect today. Our session today is structured for maximum engagement. You heard Liz say that all the time, that please be interactive, post comments, raise your hand. We'll be happy to incorporate your feedback. The duration will be 3.5 hours with 2 breaks, one 10-minute break and one 20-minute break. We plan to cover 3 objectives that Liz mentioned during this community lab, each via a separate deliberation method. We'll start with an opening keynote, followed by a swarm session for defining practical governance standards for open systems, then a community session on effective multi-stakeholder cooperations in open foundation models. And the end lab will be with an engaging ThinkScape session to deliver evaluating open versus closed AI models for effective metaverse governance. I'll just go over some ground rules for today's sessions. Please keep your microphone muted unless speaking. Please use the virtual hand signaling feature to contribute. Please be mindful of the allocated time when contributing to discussions. Please maintain respect and professionalism in discussions. At any given time, please use the chat feature for side comments. As an observer, you can use the raise hand feature to participate in any discussions. You can also use the Q&A section to share questions, concerns, and comments at any time during the session, and we will try our best to accommodate and answer them. We are using 2 profoundly novel technologies today to guide our discussion. In order to participate fully in the lab activities, you must use a laptop or a PC, as one of the technology platforms, that is ThinkScape, is not yet compatible with mobiles or tablets. Lastly, Many thanks to the individuals and representing organizations who are here today to actively contribute and observe. A full list of community partners and contributors is available on our website, metaversesafetyweek.org. Let's work together to ensure the metaverse remains a platform for freedom, equality, and respect for human rights. Let's begin. With that said, let's welcome our keynote speaker of the day, Arvind Narayanan. Arvind is a professor of computer science at Princeton University and the director of the Center of Information Technology Policy. He's a co-author of the book AI Snake Oil. He also led the Princeton Web Transparency and Accountability Project to uncover how companies collect and use our personal information. His work was among the first to show how machine learning reflects cultural stereotypes, and his doctoral research showed the fundamental limits of de-identification. We will now begin with a moderated Q&A session with Arvind and our very own Kavya Purnaman, founder and CEO of XRSI.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Q&A session for Metaverse Safety Week. I am so thrilled to be joined here by Arvind Narayanan, a renowned expert whose work has been instrumental in shaping our understanding of AI and its social impacts. Arvind, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you start by introducing yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Arvind Narayanan. I'm a professor of computer science at Princeton University, and I'm the director of the Center for Information Technology Policy. I broadly study AI and its societal impacts and other emerging technologies as well. I'm the co-author of the recent book, AI Snake Oil. It talks about what AI can do, what it can't, how to tell the difference between them. It's based on several years of research with my co-author, Sayash Kapoor, and we're also authors of the newsletter with the same name, where we comment on emerging developments in these areas.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arvind, again. So I want to get straight to it. I've been reading your book, and in this book, you explore AI's capabilities and limitations. And I think a lot of us are wondering, how do you find these capabilities or these findings? There are many bold claims, and there's the role of AI, but how do you find this kind of artificial intelligence role empowering the metaverse? And what do you see as genuine transformation and what might be overhyped?
Yeah, so maybe let's break it down. The metaverse, I think, as I understand it, is a collection of technologies, not one single technology. And I think it's, generally speaking, a few years out. And so let's break it down into a few components. So one, we can talk about generating virtual worlds, especially immersive worlds that might be generated on demand with narratives, characters, all personalized to a particular individual. So this sort of thing, there's no technical reason to expect that this can't be done. The kinds of things we call snake oil in the book are very different. It's using AI to predict the future, especially who might commit a crime in the future, that sort of thing. So the tech involved in the metaverse is very different from that. So while I do think that with enough effort, these types of AI-based immersive virtual worlds can be created, what I'm less sure of is the timeline. Many people think that these kinds of technologies are imminent. We haven't seen that. When text-to-image generators started working really well, like DALL-E or Midjourney a few years ago, people thought that video was next. It was imminent. That hasn't quite panned out yet so far. It turns out that for long-term consistency, character control, these types of technical challenges in video are much harder than for image generation. So I do think new breakthroughs are going to be needed. So that's number one. A second one relates to content moderation, trust and safety. How do you keep the metaverse environment welcoming for all users? And here we can learn a lot from social media, I think. And we have a chapter in the book on AI and social media. And while AI is very heavily used in social media content moderation today to make decisions about which content violates policies and should be taken down and which content can stay on, the limitation, though, is that a lot of the work that needs to go into it relates to our values. How do you preserve the trade-off between keeping it safe and welcoming, but not curbing down too much on people's free expression rights and interests? And those ultimately are decisions that have to be made by humans. If you try to leave those up to I think people are going to be very, very upset. And so I think we should be we should have realistic expectations about what is an automatable problem and what is not an automatable problem. So it's less about AI capabilities and more about the question of what should we use AI for.
That's fascinating. So, in terms of like, you talk extensively about AI's hype cycle, and we know that cutting through that noise is very critical. So, from your perspective, what are these real technical differences between, especially what we are assembled here today to really dive in through these open versus closed foundation models? And where do you see most realistic potential for these models to address real-world challenges?
So I think there are technical differences and also important non-technical differences between open and closed foundation models. People often think of these in terms of capabilities, but I think capability-wise, the leading open foundation models have really closed the gap with the leading closed ones. So there, I don't see a huge difference. Now we have reasoning models like OpenAI's o1, but we're also seeing open models quickly catch up with those capabilities as well. However, I think the main technical differences are going to relate to the fact that closed foundation models are not just models, they are systems, they are increasingly agentic systems. So when you interact with a chatbot online, you're not directly interacting with a model. You're interacting with something that has tool use. It can write code, it can search the web, it has input and output filters, it can do various other things. And so it's kind of vertically integrated. So it's kind of, a more closed system like Apple versus an open system like traditional PCs, where the user, in some sense, assembles software from many different sources and kind of makes their own system. So that, I think, is probably a major technical difference. So it's not in terms of capabilities, but in terms of the difference between the model and the system. Is it vertically integrated, or is there a lot of user choice in how to put it together? There are also non-technical differences. I think the approaches to safety are going to have to be very different. So in the vertically integrated way of doing things, the developer who's usually also deploying the model is responsible for everything. But in an open ecosystem, the safety responsibilities are divided among a number of participants. That's harder to get right, but there's no reason we can't get it right. And I think there's going to be a lot of innovation on the safety side that is hopefully going to enable us to solve those problems.
And do you think like one approach for open versus closed has a clear edge in maybe certain sectors like healthcare or education? Specifically asking because we're kind of trying to wrap our heads around as to what should be these recommendations. And are there any clear sectors that are like open makes sense here?
It's hard for me to make those predictions. I haven't seen clear evidence that open versus closed maps neatly to sectors. I think there are maybe other dimensions where we want to think about the relative advantages of open versus closed. So, for instance, internationally, many countries might want to invest in open foundation models so that they can encourage a homegrown AI industry. So that's one angle that I've seen talked about a lot. And you might think about governments, the nonprofit sector, for instance, where they might have governments, especially much more stringent concerns around confidentiality of the data and various other things. So there, again, open makes sense. So I would think about it that way as opposed to differences between different industries.
Right. Yeah. And Arvind, you've been at the forefront of exposing how AI systems can amplify societal biases. So considering open versus closed foundation model, do you think one approach might hold more potential for minimizing those risks?
There are many things we might mean when we talk about biases. Excuse me, there are, of course, gender and racial biases. There are also things like concerns around model developers controlling what we call in the book the Overton window of speech, determining what is acceptable speech and what is considered too radical to be allowed by these models, right? What questions are you not even allowed to ask a model, and when it gives back responses, are there biases in its responses, concerns around political bias, for instance? So when it comes to the more classically considered types of biases, like gender and racial biases, I don't think there is a big open versus closed difference. But like I was saying earlier, with open models, because you have different parties contributing to the overall system, the responsibility for mitigating those biases is more distributed, and there are more nuances there, and it's trickier to get right in many cases. However, when it comes to these concerns around centralized control over speech, there, I think open models have a clear advantage. They allow different parties to tailor those models to the needs of different populations, whether it's in different countries or um, different sectors or whatever it is. But at the same time, we also have to think about the fact that with open foundation models, if we're concerned about authoritarian governments, for instance, they would more easily be able to use an open model to make it conform to whatever kind of propaganda they want to do or something like that by tailoring the model themselves. I think that's just something that we're going to have to live with. It's not as if they can't do propaganda without open foundation models. I think we have to have other defenses to seek to, build resilience and democratic institutions in our society, whether we have foundation models or not.
Yeah. And then just, sort of building upon the same aspect, especially when we think about governments using these technologies for surveillance and data collection, protecting user data while fostering innovation, that's always been a challenge for a while. In fact, some of your research was in de-anonymizing data, the privacy research that you've conducted. So this has been a challenge. And for these open foundation models, do you have any recommendation for technical architecture or maybe any kind of approaches or maybe something that closed foundation models could do differently? Like, what is the most realistic way for us to move forward in being safe, but at the same time a bit more balanced, because I hear a lot of people talking about, we should do this, we should do that, but there isn't really a practical understanding, and that's what I'm kind of looking for, is what should we be moving forward, because it can't just be open versus closed. It's got to be somewhere, like a smart openness or something like that.
There's this recent story going around where ChatGPT is not allowed to say the name David Mayer if if it's producing a response and the answer involves the term David Mayer. There is some filter that activates and shuts off ChatGPT, and it's not allowed to continue with the response. People have been speculating a lot about why that is. I'm not sure if there has been a conclusive answer or any official word from OpenAI, but one theory is that this involves one particular prominent person named David Mayer when there was a defamation lawsuit, and the settlement of the defamation lawsuit was to prevent ChatGPT from ever saying the name David Mayer. So I think this illustrates a lot of things. These closed model providers have chosen one particular governance structure when it comes to issues around user data, or in this case, defamation. I think it has some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage is that if someone is concerned, they know, these are like the top 3 model providers, I have to, sue them, or if they have some official way to make a request to remove your data from it, you go ahead and make that request. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is that we are limited to whatever potentially really crude ways of dealing with those requests these closed model providers have. I think with the open providers, it's a very different story. There are going to be hundreds of models. And again, the model provider is not the app developer. They're not also deploying the model. And so there are going to be even a greater set of developers. So you might not even know who to even turn to for data protection, right? And so this approach of asking all the model developers and deployers to do the right thing is maybe not going to work, right? So I think we need to set baseline standards. Some of that is going to have to come through regulation. The EU with the GDPR has been leading the way on that in many ways. That has some pros and cons. There are concerns about, is that too strict? What impacts does it have on innovation? But in any case, whatever one thinks of any specific regulations, regulation, I think, obviously does have a big role to play. But in addition, I think what we should take advantage of is that with open models, there can be a lot more innovation that goes into how this data protection happens. It doesn't have to be this crude censoring of the word David Mayer, for instance, right? There can be lots of different ways of thinking about what the solution involves. And I think that's a big opportunity.
Yeah, and then extending that sort of user protection to now, let's think about what metrics could be used to assess the safety, reliability, transparency, those type of capabilities. And looking at deployments like Llama in virtual worlds, what kind of transparency practices do you think these companies would need to adopt to build public trust?
Yeah, so some of my colleagues, especially at Stanford, but also Sayesh Kapoor, who I work with, have come up with something they're calling the Foundation Model Transparency Index. So they've really thought carefully through this problem, and they've come up with a set of 100 detailed indicators that covers everything from the training data to aspects of the model to the kind of post-processing that's done and so forth. So I encourage folks to take a look at that, and it's not just a one-time thing. They're evolving that over time as the ecosystem changes. So I think efforts like that to kind of standardize transparency are going to be really important. In addition, I would say, and this is a pet talking point for me, we have to start thinking beyond models and start thinking about systems. So a lot of the transparency is not about the models themselves, but the overall system that users interact with, which are quickly getting much more complex than the individual models. And we can learn a lot from the history of social media transparency. 10 years ago, social media companies were not transparent at all. And then after a lot of public pressure, Meta and many others started putting out these transparency reports on a quarterly or semi-annual basis. And now, with the Digital Services Act in the EU and various other regulation, a lot of that is actually reported by law. So we have many precedents that we can look for, and we have to adapt it in various ways when it comes to foundation models, metaverse, and other emerging technologies.
And I have been, critically thinking about this, but is still trying to wrap my head around what, and this is not documented in the book, because your book was written pre-US election 2024. And I'm curious, what are you seeing or speculating at this time the impact that the outcome of US election might have on the governance of AI or just, our approach moving forward?
Yeah, it's of course all speculation at this point. We don't know what policies they're actually going to implement. A lot of it is based on the various campaign promises that they have made. But generally, we can infer, I think, that this is going to be a more business-friendly administration. And of course, there's been a promise to repeal the Biden-Harris executive order on AI. So let's see what happens with that. I don't think it makes sense to completely repeal it. I think there are a lot of provisions in there, such as improving tech capacity in government, for instance, which is in the interest, I think, of the incoming administration, regardless of what their perspectives are on how light touch or heavy regulation should be. And so I think, yeah, a lot of things are going to change. The extent of that change remains unclear. Broadly, it's going to be more business friendly. I think it's going to put the onus a little bit more on civil society to, for instance, find other ways of incentivizing companies to do the right thing and maybe relying less on regulation, especially regulation in the form of the executive order and other actions coming from the executive side as opposed to legislation. I do think legislation in the US context, especially federal legislation, is also going to continue to be very slow, but we're seeing a lot of movement in the states. The last I heard, more than 700 AI-related bills have been introduced in the different state legislatures in 2024 alone, and dozens of them have passed. So I think the landscape is pretty varied. It's not entirely up to the incoming administration. I think there are going to be various ways of governing AI that we have been seeing and will continue to see.
Well, and thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. And that's why we'll keep track on how you are putting the knowledge out there. I follow you on X platform and of course on LinkedIn. So thank you again, Arvind. Your thoughtful answers for, sharing these valuable insights.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Kavya, for moderating, and thank you, Arvind, for sharing so many valuable insights. There are so many takeaways. I was taking notes. There were so many resources shared. Amazing food for thought, and something that we can use for the rest of the session to guide discussions around innovative approaches, like Arvind mentioned, the civil society coming together and thinking about different ways where we can reduce harms from these open foundation models. Next, we will now welcome our next speaker, Anne Hobson, to share her views on defining practical governance standards for open systems. Anne is a policy manager at Reality Labs Meta. Prior to that, she was a program manager at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, where she oversaw graduate fellows pursuing degrees in applied economics with a focus on public policy. She was an Internet Law and Policy Foundry Fellow with the Internet Education Foundation previously, and worked as a Technology Policy Fellow at the R Street Institute and as a Public Policy Associate at Facebook. Anne has a PhD in economics from George Mason University and a BA in international studies from Johns Hopkins University.
Thanks so much. And special thanks to Kavya, Nandita, and the XRSI team for inviting me. I'm excited to virtually be here. As mentioned, I'm on the Reality Labs policy team at Meta, and I'm the public policy lead for the Metaverse product group. A few years ago, we announced that we were building towards the Metaverse quite publicly. Since then, we've made a lot of progress on XR devices, which are one way to experience blended reality content, from smart glasses to mixed reality headsets. These XR technologies, like VR headsets, can give people a taste of what the metaverse will be like, but not what it is yet. And that's because the metaverse will not be fully realized until you can seamlessly travel across experiences between and within different platforms, apps, and worlds, and until you can represent yourself how you want to represent yourself and bring your digital assets or avatar along with you. And that cross-platform travel and bringing those digital assets with you requires interoperability, protocols, and open standards. It requires a certain degree of openness, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. But what is openness? What is an open XR ecosystem? There are a number of themes and components of openness that have come up when we've talked to folks about this. So the first is interoperability. Built on shared protocols, standards, it allows for travel across realms, so some degree of freedom of movement, and it allows seamless integration between the physical and digital worlds. The second component is accessibility. It's free or low cost to access, easy to access from a variety of devices, everything from mobile to XR devices. There's a low burden to enter or to register. It's easily discoverable and enables free expression and interaction. The last component is buildability. So it's easy to build in and for. And if any of these components sound familiar, that's because they are all true about today's internet. The internet at first was interoperable at an ecosystem level through shared protocols built on top of physical connected infrastructure, which has increasingly become wireless. So computers could talk to each other using the same set of open protocols, HTTP for one, TCP/IP. It was also buildable, so anyone with an internet connection could build a website and at no cost using HTML. The early internet was connected in that third parties and intermediaries like payment processors could easily be integrated. The early internet was also accessible, so almost any site could be accessed by any device, browser, and user connected to the internet. Openness matters because it means everyone can reap the benefits of more immersive experiences, from being able to build and make a living in digital environments, to immersive education, to achieving more natural social interaction with people who are far away. It is also worth acknowledging that openness is a spectrum. So one way to think of this is home security. If I leave a door to my house open wide, my house is certainly accessible, but I'm likely going to get robbed. By contrast, if I never open my door and keep it locked, I forgo the benefits of doing interesting things beyond my door. To quote Bilbo in Lord of the Rings, which is my favorite book series, it is a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your front door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you may be swept off to. To reiterate, the metaverse is the successor to the mobile internet. It's the spatial internet. It's a set of digitally enhanced or blended spaces that are interconnected, so you can easily move between them. Our vision for our space within the larger metaverse is the Horizon universe. And the important aspect here is that it has to be open to be successful. People need to be able to travel in and out of it. Access should be available globally. And people need to be able to easily build worlds within it and to monetize. One thing that is important to note to tie this to another aspect of the theme today is the metaverse has always been dependent upon AI and will always be intertwined with AI capabilities. We'll see the proliferation of generative AI-based creation tools. Quick plug here, if you haven't used the generative AI shirt retexturing feature for our Meta avatars, go try it on the Meta Horizon app in Avatar Editor. It is fun and compelling. I made a sweatshirt with a bunch of fedoras printed all over it, and it looks pretty cool. But in the future, people aren't just going to be able to do that. They're going to leverage Gen AI to create worlds, code, items, and characters. So the non-player characters that you've encountered in video game-like spaces before are going to come to life. I imagine Navi in Ocarina of Time, which was, I think, the first video game I ever built on N6 or ever beat on N64. Importantly, our contribution to that wider metaverse, the Horizon universe, will be built on our Open Horizon OS. So I'm going to talk about our progress at each layer of the tech stack and demonstrate how that contributes to the openness vision. So first, the foundational layer. This year, we opened up the Horizon OS, our operating system powering our MetaQuest devices, to third-party hardware makers. And we're partnering with leading technology companies like Lenovo and Qualcomm to bring that new ecosystem to life. The idea of the open OS here is that hardware companies can build next-generation devices and leverage our common platform. They can ship their software experiences seamlessly across compatible hardware, and people can choose the products that they want that work for them and their specific needs and interests. So you can imagine a device that is that the form factor makes it really easy to use while you're doing yoga. And so it's made to allow virtual yoga experiences to be the best. Our efforts at creating this open OS layer began almost a decade ago when we were involved in the foundations of the Android open source project. And since then, we've pioneered a full stack of technologies that make today's devices possible. So that's things like standalone headset tracking, eye, face, and body tracking, high-res, full color, low latency pass-through, and things like scene understanding and spatial anchors, all the way to running 2D apps easily in 3D spaces, and mixed reality capabilities as well. Now developers on the Horizon OS can take advantage of custom frameworks and toolings that we've built, including our AI creation tools that we announced at Connect this year, a conference about 2 months ago. And they can reach their communities, they can grow their businesses through the content discovery and monetization platforms we've built into the OS, most notably the Meta Horizon Store. The OS supports a common set of services, say Horizon services. These put people and social connection at the heart of everything. These platform services are the next layer up. So these are things like APIs or tools available to applications that enable them to participate in the shared metaverse ecosystem. So for example, if they plug into the Destinations API, then people can go from one app to their app and more easily travel across digital experiences. These services are meant to provide applications with a common basis for identity, commerce, sharing, communication, travel, and things like storage. Also things like safety and integrity tools. So the block API is something that an app can integrate with if it wants to respect a block that you have made in another app. Horizon services, beyond that, the top layer, is Horizon Worlds. Right now, it is an app entry point on the MetaQuest headset. It is available in the Meta Horizon app on your mobile phone. It is also an integrated experience with our OS. So what that means is that Meta Horizon is evolving into a collection of worlds or experiences or spaces. In essence, it's a browser. So each world can look like a separate app or experience in the Meta Horizon store, or it can be accessible via portals from other worlds. In this way, worlds are more like the future version of web pages. So they're integrated destinations that live alongside one another, and you can access them across a number of different devices, including those headsets I mentioned that are going to be integrating Horizon OS, but that are not built by us. So to summarize, our goal is to continue to foster an open XR ecosystem. We're involved in standards conversations through the XR Association, Tech Coalition, and Metaverse Standards Forum, among many others. This is one place where those types of conversations take place as well, XRSI. And we also conduct engagements with a wide range of folks, including the folks in this room. So I'm excited to hear how you all think and navigate the trade-offs as it relates to openness in the XR context. So I want to finish by thanking you again for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm excited to be here and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks so much. I'll pass it back to, I think, Nandita.
Thanks, Anne. You touched on a number of important points on focusing on openness as well as being set up for success with the right controls in place and the resources that are available. If you have resources that you would like to share with the community for reading, please post them in the chat. I've been looking for some, but I wasn't sure they were the right ones, so feel free to do that. We have a lot of experts who have joined this session today, so we definitely want to hear from everyone. This is the part where we get to hear from the community and start iterating on different ideas that have been we've set the stage for. So let's start the next intelligence gathering session. We will now begin with an intelligence gathering session where all the speakers and participants will take part in a collaborative exercise by responding to a strategically curated set of questions via Swarm platform, a tool by Unanimous AI. This innovative approach combines real-time human insights with AI algorithms inspired by nature's swarm intelligence to amplify collective decision-making. At any given time, no personal data will be collected beyond already permitted, and the aggregate input from the exercise of the collective intelligence gathering will be recorded and published in the lab report. In this session, we will explore governance models that balance innovation and enforceable safety standards within open metaverse systems. We will discuss insights on policy solutions tailored to the challenges of rapidly evolving decentralized technologies, addressing how governance can ensure user safety and privacy without hindering technical progress. We will collectively identify practical approaches to defining standards that are both adaptable and effective in safeguarding the metaverse ecosystem. We'll just begin with some introductions on how to use the tool. Before we begin our Swarm sessions, let's review what we're going to do today. I would like to ask each of you to join a Swarm link that is shared in the Zoom chat by my colleagues, and I will be doing it along. So if there are any issues, please share in the chat. Okay, we'll click on the link. We will combine your input with Swarm AI technology to gather insights and unlock the collective intelligence of this group. Our goal is to converge on the best possible answer for each question by combining the knowledge, wisdom, insights, and intuition of the full group. When you put your mouse next to the spinning puck, it turns into a magnet, and feel free to start testing it out and let us know if there's anything that you need help with. Your magnet is green. Everyone else's magnet is gold. Use the magnet to pull on the puck. Pull for the answer or answers you believe in, but remain open to compromise if you think it's appropriate, so that an answer is arrived at the end of the time. We will be willing to consider a second or third choice answer when appropriate for you, and be willing to consider a third or even second choice answer when that's appropriate for you and a given question. The closer your magnet is to the puck, the stronger its pull. Keep in mind, you will need to continuously pull with your magnet during each answer. If you are not pulling on the puck with your magnet, you will have no impact on the influence of the final outcome. Again, our goal is to converge on the best possible answer for each question by combining the knowledge from this full group. Given some of you have already used this tool last year, while many of you are new, we have decided to do some warm-up before we start the actual questions for us to prepare, ensuring that all participants are on the same page. Remember, before each question, there will be a 15-second timer to read the question and the option. So let's begin we'll start with a practice question 1. And Bhanu, can we show the first question? Perfect. What is the most important invention of the 19th century? So once the think timer is done, let's start pulling on the answer. It looks like we were successful in converging on an answer, and collectively we decided on the light bulb. That's great. Now let's do another practice question just to make sure everybody is familiar. What is the most important invention of the 20th century? So once the think timer allows us, let's start pulling on the response that is most appropriate. Right. I think it took us less time to arrive on this answer. Thanks, everyone. It looks like now everybody's familiar on how to use this tool. So we'll get into the actual community lab. All right. I don't see any questions, so that's great. But if you are running into anything, do let Bhanu or the group chat know, and we'll respond. Now let's move to the actual questions planned in this section of the community lab. Today, there'll be a total of 9 questions, where 2 will have multiple rounds. As we proceed, you will first see the long form of the question on the slide. And once you have the read of the question, the swarm screen will change and move to the 15-second ticker for you to read the options. After the 15 seconds, you can start pulling the mouse and the cursors. We will follow this pattern for all the 9 questions. So let's start with the first question. Please move your focus and attention to the swarm screens and participate in this collaborative exercise. Which of these accountability mechanisms holds the greatest potential for success in ensuring decentralized open foundation AI governance? All right. So it looks like the swarm agreed on transparent code audit frameworks. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about for everybody who selected this option. Please feel free to raise your hand or in the chat share why you think the transparent code audit frameworks are the most optimal approach. I can't see everyone, so I'm going to make sure I'm monitoring the chat. Liam says that the code audit frameworks can be a good baseline where open source community regulation fails. It's great. Allowing tools to make sure there is self audits or self governance frameworks in place. Anyone else who has okay. All right, so then we will move on to the next question. Which stakeholder group faces the greatest challenge in achieving effective governance outcomes in open foundation AI governance? Right, and then we will move to the swarm screen. It looks like the answer is users understanding rights and responsibilities. Coming from a privacy background, I completely agree with this outcome. There's a huge information asymmetry, and users, unfortunately, do not have the right information and context to make the right decisions for their safety and privacy. Would love to hear other participants and experts on what their thoughts are and why they choose users for the outcome of this session. Feel free to drop any resources if you prefer. Okay, Arjun has a comment here, heavy dissent against the outcome. The responsibility of policymakers outweighs the agencies of users. Valid. And Arjun, just to make sure, all the other options would also be included in the community report, the lab report that's generated. So we would love to encourage any dissenting opinions or if you don't agree with the outcome as well, feel free to keep that coming. All right, we will move on to the next question. The next two questions are a form of rating category in which we will have to find either the most or the least effective or urgent of the options. So we'll start with how effectively can decentralized community-driven governance structures close accountability gaps in open foundation AI systems. And we look at the swarm screen for what options exist. 15 seconds to think about the response you want to converge on. Looks like we all converged on somewhat effective. So there is a 68% conviction that there is some positive outcome from decentralized governance. If anybody feels strongly about the answer or has a separate opinion, feel free to share in the chat or raise your hand and we'll ask you to speak. And
Yeah, thanks. I'm bullish about about decentralized governance mechanisms in general. It both personally and professionally. Like I've done some research on this as well, but I think we've seen it work relatively well in internet governance today. Now, not perfectly, and I don't think it could work perfectly. But one of the things that most excites me about decentralized governance mechanisms is they have staying power as institutions. So once they're set up and once they are able to function, and we have a lot that function today, some of which I mentioned in my talk, like the Metaverse Standards Forum, then they have the ability, more so than say states or policymakers who may not um, be in power for very long standard points of time. They have the ability to affect the ecosystem outcomes for a longer period of time.
agreed. And we've seen it in other sectors how decentralized models have been more effective. Um, there is some pushback against like purely relying on regulations and using the stick approach, which encourages organizations to use the regulation as the ceiling and do the bare minimum to meet regulations. So happy to hear other perspectives as well. We have a comment from Liam on the term um, decentralized and the need for better ways to certify something as decentralized. The trust is a preferred term. Thank you, Liam, for your feedback. Okay, then we move on to the next question, again in the same rating format. How urgent is the need for standardizing transparency and trust frameworks across open foundation AI platforms to mitigate risks and build public confidence? Fifteen seconds to think about the responses before trying to converge. Looks like the community converged on extremely urgent. I saw that the contenders were urgent and extremely urgent. So it's good that we are all kind of thinking about that something needs to be done. One, for people who selected extremely urgent, what do you think are the factors that make it so urgent right now? There's a lot of conversations and discussions around this space, a lot of regulations being passed. So I feel like, yeah, this is the right time to take action and to build something that is a standard approach which organizations can adopt. But happy to hear any other thoughts or resources in this space. Hmm. Looks like we have this almost seems like no-brainer. It looks like for the community that yes, this is urgent. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, Arjun has a feedback on the nature. There is a black box and it's ultra fast propagation in tech. So that raises the urgency levels and why we need to take action right now. Thanks for sharing that feedback. Okay, let's move on to the next part of the discussion. The next two questions are two-part questions. In the first part, we will collectively conclude a percentage range. And in the second part, we will be further asked to drill down on the exact percentage values. You will see what I mean as we go through the question. Let me start with the question. What percentage of developers and platform providers will voluntarily adopt accountability structures for Open Foundation AI within the next 3 years? Fifteen seconds to think. Slightly pessimistic view from our community that we think that 20 to 40% would adopt voluntarily adopt these Open Foundation structures for accountability. Yeah, I mean, should, yes, 100%, but would, how many would? Yeah, a little bit of a slower number. Okay, percentage of developers to adopt AI accountability structures in the next 3 years. It's 25. Anybody else has a different view or thinks it could be higher or lower? Feel free to post your comments in the chat. And then we will move on to the next question. How likely is it that regulatory frameworks for open AI systems will achieve harmonization across jurisdictions within the next 5 years? So we're asking you to predict the future and estimate the likelihood of open AI regulations harmonizing globally. Okay, so the swarm says 0 to 20%. Again, another pessimistic view from the community on the likelihood of that happening. And let's see, within the 0 to 20%, what if we had to pick a likelihood, what would that be? Okay, with a 69% conviction, we believe that the likelihood of open AI regulations harmonizing globally over the next 5 years is 10%. And I have a little bit of a different view because I've been following the privacy regulatory landscape example that looks like even within the US, within the states itself, we have not been able to harmonize. Forget about the world. It's been a while. So I feel, personal opinion, that it should be much lower. I would say 0% in the next 5 years. And you have your hand raised. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I have similar POV. I feel like we've seen this movie before, even just for the internet as well. But I also don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, like in the sense that you can see, depending on what the regulations are, and I think each of the past couple questions have all depended upon what an assumption about what you think, how strict you think the regulations are going to come out, or even standards or anything are going to be out of these deliberative processes. And so if you assume that some are going to be more strict than others, which I think is a reasonable assumption, I think that degree of competition among different governance regimes and mechanisms helps us over time reach the ideal state of where we should be. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, but it is a challenge.
Oh, I see what you're saying, that, the rigor in every regulation being proposed is different. Some are you do you, and some are really high, with like very stringent innovation blocking bars. So where do we land? And it will take a while for us to converge on something globally. That's good. Anybody else has views on, regulatory landscape? Feel free to chime in. And then we'll move on to the last question, which is also a form of a rating question, as we did in the last few. How feasible is it to implement adaptive accountability structures that incentivize stakeholder participation while minimizing additional system complexity? It's a mouthful, so we'll wait for the Swarm AI screen to pop up. Okay. Can adaptive accountability incentivize participation without complexity? It looks like with a high conviction, 89% conviction, we feel it's slightly feasible. My question to the group, when you hear the words adaptive accountability, what comes to mind? And when you think about adaptive accountability and being hopeful for that being a solution? A lot of comments in the chat. Liam, adaptive accountability depends on the granularity of all the components. Makes sense. Divya has comments on the regulation side of things. The challenge is that many governments consider AI to be part of their intelligence and defense strategy. So they are not going to harmonize on regulation if they perceive it puts them at a disadvantage. Arvind also spoke about some of this on how countries may use it as a propaganda tool, and they may have a different bar for what that means in their country, and may it be hard to harmonize it across the globe. So great points, Divya. Maybe some commentary on the Doge. Maybe I'm not sure if that's like serious commentary or if there's some sidebar. Arjun has some comments on it needs truly global enforcement. If Europe, for example, applies stricter regulations, the innovators will just flock to America, which is valid concerns. And we've been hearing a lot about this in the EU context that stricter regulation is going to block innovation and harm their economy. Okay, all right, it looks like we will have a 20-minute break. And given that all our questions have finished, and we will come back at in 20 minutes, that is 10:35 Pacific time.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a few minutes to stretch your legs and you are ready for the next section of this special day on for the 5th annual Metaverse Safety Week. This edition of the roundtable focused on global policy and governance. So once again, I am Elizabeth Rothman. I'm XRSI's Senior Legal Affairs and Digital Trust Advisor, and I will be moderating this open community session. This session will begin with Pam Dixon of the World Privacy Forum setting the stage with a little context overview, followed by a dynamic 5-minute presentations from some leading experts in the field to shed some light on our second objective of the day. That objective is effective multi-stakeholder cooperation and open foundation models. So together, these discussions will explore actionable strategies for fostering trust and transparency in decentralized open systems by addressing clear assignment of responsibility among developers, platform policymakers, and users. These experts will tackle unique challenges of open foundation models, focusing on adaptive accountability, structures that balance innovation with robust user protections, and equipping participants with practical insights to navigate the complexities of open system governance. So as I think we saw in the last sessions, there's some of these words, there's confusion around everybody has kind of a different interpretation of them, whether you're a developer, whether you're a user, if you're a policymaker, whatever side that you are on in this equation, it's really important to hear each other out so that we can come to a common language on what some of these terms mean and how we all interpret them. Because we may all look at decentralization or trust or some of these words in very, very different ways. And we could see that somewhat when we were doing the exercises with Swarm AI as to how people kind of gravitate in different directions. So that's something that I hope will come out of this. We're going to have first, a presentation from Pam Dixon, who I'll introduce in just a moment. And then after that, a series of 5-minute presentations. You are encouraged towards the end of this session, if you are not one of the prepared presentations for this section, to raise your hand. If there's time, we would love to have your remarks. And please use the hand raise function in Zoom, and we will call on people as time allows towards the end of this session. In addition to that, a reminder, continue to use the chat. Everybody's been very active in there. Please continue to paste any articles, links, thoughts that you may have on the ongoing conversation here into the chat, and that will all again be integrated into a final report for this day today. Okay, so first, we're going to welcome. I think Pam, are you ready to go? Okay, so we're welcoming Pam Dixon. Pam Dixon is the founder and executive director of the World Privacy Forum. She's a leading expert in privacy, AI, data ecosystem governance for over 20 years and has a lot of influential research. She has worked globally across the US, EU, India, Africa, Asia, all over the world, and is a pioneer in digital identity and biometrics research. Her work has shaped international policies all around the world. She's an author of many books and numerous studies, and is a recipient of the EFF Pioneer Award and widely recognized for her groundbreaking contributions to privacy and data governance. So I will now turn the floor over to Pam Dixon for her remarks.
Thank you so much. What a nice introduction. Can I have you introduce me all the time? All right. I'm going to go ahead. I have some slides. I'm going to move through them quickly. And basically what I'd like to do is just really provide some context for open foundation models. We're involved in a lot of conversations about these kinds of models, and the differences in understanding are really significant. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let us find the keynote and share. And I hope it's all happy. Oh, it is. Great. Okay. So In terms of definitions of open foundation models, the most important thing you can know right away is that there's no agreement on this definition. So because of that situation, what I like to do is think in terms of a continuum of models and definitions and broad characteristics. And in this way, we can still talk to each other without inciting really significant arguments. So this is what that looks like. So it's really important to understand that when we talk about these models, there's not all open and all closed and nothing in between. Really, if you look, there's some completely closed models, some of the health-related models. There's some DeepMind models that are closed. Gopher is one example. There's staged release models. This is, I think, that probably one of the better known examples is Stable Diffusion. And then there's gated access models where the public can access them, but they're hosted. So the great example here is Midjourney. And then there's gated access that's a little bit broader, that includes an API. That's really ChatGPT 3 and on up. And you can see this, of course, from the OpenAI products. There's many others. Anthropic has a product. There's a lot of products in this range where there's some kind of a little more open gated access. And then there's moving more toward the open side of the spectrum. There's gated access, but pieces are downloadable. So a great example here is Crayon. So then you have totally open models, which are actually a little more rare. And totally open models, my favorite example of this is really GPT-J, which is an extremely open model. So that's really your continuum. And characteristics toward the more closed end, you definitely have the capacity to have more control of the risks in the model. You, on the other hand, you have lower auditability of that model. And another issue is what I would call socio-technical, where you may have limited inputs, particularly from broader constituencies, depending on the model. Now, characteristics that begin to show up toward the more open end of models is that you definitely have less or lower risk control. Some of the risks just simply move out of your ability. You can see this with model poisoning, things like that. Once your model is out, it is Pandora's box. You cannot pull that back. They're definitely, when you have a more open model, you definitely have the benefit of much higher auditability depending on the model and where they sit on the continuum. Also, you can have the capacity for much broader access and many more perspectives, including community perspective, different languages, different kinds of inputs, different kinds of data sets. There's greater customization, and there's more, but this is a good start. So I love the keynote that we had from Arvind Narayanan, which I never pronounced properly, but he talked about the ecosystem, and I was so happy. I was clapping when he said that, because that's about what I'm going to move into right now. So looking at, the continuum of models, remember that they sit in a very meaningful global ecosystem that has a lot of politics and all sorts of other things involved. So this is the first ecosystem I'd like you to consider in terms of open and closed models. So this is from the Stanford AI Index. I bet all of you know about it. If you don't, you're going to love this. The top 10 global AI leaders begins with the United States, China, UK, India, UAE, France, South Korea, Germany, Japan, and Singapore. These are pretty definitive. With the United States, when you look at the statistics, it's just way, it's quite dominant for a number of factors. The second ecosystem item I'd like you to consider is velocity. And you can see that here. This is again from the Stanford AI Index, but it's GitHub data. So you can see here in 2011, this was really flat. And then there was some really amazing research that happened right around 2016 and 2017. Then we moved into this exponential curve that we're in right now. So if you think that we're behind, or if you're personally feeling behind, this is why it's really hard for us to keep up with stuff like this. But this is the context that we're in. These models are moving rapidly. This is developing quite rapidly. And then another thing that I want to talk about is inclusion. This is a really big deal. So now this is from the OECD AI Observatory, and this is a real-time compendium of open source data sets that are being used in open models and other models. But it's really important to understand that the inclusion factor in these models is quite difficult. This is the English language here. The very next closest one is French, followed by Chinese and Russian, then Spanish, then Portuguese, German, Polish, Korean, Zulu, Swedish, Catalan, Arabic, Japanese, and then it goes on and on and on. And you can see the development very quickly of a long tail with some very, very dominant languages. This is an inclusion problem for all of these models that we're talking about, and it's part of the ecosystem, and this becomes part of the multi-stakeholder conversation. Now, when you talk about open source models, you're not always going to hear these ecosystem concerns, but I really want you to be aware of them because they're quite important. The other ecosystem concern is just what I would call the power vacuum. Now, you saw the leading AI providers. This is again from the OECD AI Observatory. This is real time up to the moment from December 2024. And what this is visualizing is the initiative count of AI projects. This is all AI projects, by the way, not just models. But this is a really good proxy for kind of where you see the concentration of activity. And I would like to point out here, there are some very meaningful jurisdictional gaps in inclusion, which means there's going to be linguistic and other kinds of gaps, multiple socio-technical gaps. All right, so that is what I would call more of the very significant ecosystem impacts on open models. They're meaningful. There are also impacts per model, and I'm going to turn to that very quickly. Now, this is from a paper I really like, which I'm going to provide the reference for next. This is on the societal impact of open foundation models. And you can see here what we often hear about as risks of open source model, which is scams, mis and disinformation, biosecurity, non-consensual data uses, etc. And this paper does a really great idea of going through these particulars. So we have two contexts. And by the way, these are not the only particulars that exist. There's also benefits to talk about, and et cetera. But here's the thing. When you're talking about open foundation model policy and governance, you really need to keep those really big ecosystem pictures in mind, as well as these more precise risks. And then here is the site for that, and I'll share these slides in the chat. And now I want to get to my final point of discussion, which is this. We're back at our continuum. There's characteristics for both risks and benefits on each side. These are pretty well understood. But here's the multi-stakeholder implications. We need to consider the distribution of decision-making power when we're considering solutions and when we're considering who has a seat at the table. When we look around the table, when we're having a purported multi-stakeholder conversation, who's missing? Who isn't there? And why? Is it possible to bring those stakeholders in some way? Can we address the equities that should be at the table? There's a lot of market concentration problems due to lack of compute in certain jurisdictions. This is very difficult to address. There are political and national security issues that have begun to come up here, and we're going to have to navigate that. And it is not going to be easy. It will probably be increasingly difficult to address that aspect of governance of open models. And there, of course, is the on the benefit side, you have, how are we going to just make sure there's good distribution of the potential for good innovation? And then, of course, transparency. There's so many other things, but that's a starter kit. Now, in terms of discussions, I work in 3 different multilaterals, and so I'm really used to multi-stakeholder discussions. So I wanted to share with you just these few really key points. When you think about remedies here, make sure that you're thinking in layers of remedies. You have layers of remedies from the very precise to the more ecosystem level. You're not going to get all the remedies at once, but it's great to think in those levels and to know that those other levels exist. So there are precise problems, but there are also contextual and socio-technical contexts to consider. There is a lot of work right now being done on precise frameworks, and I think this is important work, and I think this is where we might find more agreement across many jurisdictions. So threat identification that's quite precise could be helpful here, but also threat identification, if we possibly can work it out, that addresses these broader socio-technical differences in contexts and make sure we have inclusion of all the equities here. That's going to be also a challenge to then include, and that's something to consider in any multi-stakeholder conversation. So I believe I'm at time, and so I'm going to conclude here and just reiterate a couple of things, just very, very briefly. Models are not settled. Not yet in terms of definitions. You have a continuum of models. We've got precise problems and we've got ecosystem problems. They require a range of layered solutions, and we need to make sure we're being very inclusive in our solutions, understanding that we will not get to 100% agreement at this point in our history. So those are my thoughts for you. I hope they're helpful. Here's my email. Please feel free to reach out. And I will put these slides in PDF and share them in the chat. And the organizers have the slides. And please feel free to share these slides freely as resources. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the continuing discussion. And thank you for your kind invitation to me for today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was a wonderful context setting for this session. I think that it really gives everyone here a clear understanding of where we are right now. And, some of these conversations around the terminology and what it means to be an open model, what decentralized governance is, all of these things they are evolving, and our understanding of them is evolving at the same time. And so thank you so much for laying all of that out. And then obviously the geopolitical implications of all of these things and the differences around the world and how models are developed, the primary language being English in almost all of the models. And when we're looking at the stakeholders here, really trying to see who's missing from the table. I think that's such an important point. And that's something that we're going to have to keep coming back to. I see a lot of chat in a lot of things in the chat about incentive alignment and how, some pessimism around if incentives can be aligned to effectively bring in all of these stakeholders. And I hope that some of the speakers in this session will shed some more light on that as well. I haven't had a chance to get through all of the comments there yet, but Pam, thank you so much for your time and being here and continued involvement in these efforts. So we are going to now have several experts that have prepared about 5-minute remarks for us. So we'll go through those. I'm going to introduce the first. The first speaker will be Vivav Mittal, associate partner of Anand and Anand. Vivav is an AI, intellectual property, and emerging technologies lawyer from India who focuses on AI from a non-technical lens. On AI, his experience lies in exploring legal and policy issues and offering practical solutions. He is one of the lead drafters of the Developers Playbook for Responsible AI in India, published in 2024. And previously, he has also been cited for his views on AI audits in India's AI generative AI report, and he's co-authored two editions of India Charter on Artificial Intelligence Law, published by Lexology, and in July of 2024 and December of 2024. And he's a global thought leader and an expert on AI and partners with on the EU AI Act Expert Series. And he also has co-authored articles that analyze various aspects of the EU AI Act. So we are very thrilled to have him here today, and to continue to provide some insights into this session.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that kind introduction. And I'm just going to pick up right where Pam ended, and I think this is a good starting point, right? So the first thought about it, we're talking about open foundation models. Just to be very clear, when we talk about foundation models, we're talking about models that have broad capabilities, can be applied across different contexts. On the aspect now, I agree. I will come to the part on the definition not being settled, but for the practicality of when we're talking about governance of open foundation AI models, one of the practicalities that we obviously have to consider about this model in terms of governance also is the fact that we have only so many foundation models. There are certain cost implications involved in terms of hardware, in terms of the data that might be needed, and how they would be built. That is the practical aspect of it. Now, when we look at the open component of open foundation and models, picking up from where Pam left off, is about when do we how do I break down this term open, right? The first is, am I talking about the data? Am I talking about making publicly disclosable the training data? Am I talking about the software for which the algorithm was used? Three, am I talking about the model weights? For the audience, model weights could be the data that results from training your algorithms on the basis of which it generates content. Or am I talking about certain hardware components that are being made open? If I look at this from a legal lens, right, we don't have perfect answers for this, but if I quickly look at the legal lens, we have the EU AI Act, which mentions that weight parameters, information model architecture, and information and model usage, if that is disclosed, then certain entities are exempt from transparency requirements. At the same time, that is qualified by which application or which risk category those open models would operate in. Simply put, if they are in a high risk category, certain obligations will continue to apply even though the transparency requirement may have been met. The other interesting aspect when we look at the governance of OpenAI, one is, of course, what should I be disclosing about open foundation AI models? The second aspect is that irrespective of everything else, if you look at current laws, they speak about disclosure at least of copyright protected, or if your model has been made on copyright protected content, that by itself is an open question, because whether that disclosure should be required or not be required is again goes both ways. If the model has already been developed, you've already been sued, then disclosing that is problematic because it's sub judice. If we're talking about going forward, then we're talking about perhaps licenses for those datas, which has already started happening. Or alternatively, if you're going forward about disclosing any copyright protected content in the training data set, then we're talking about a situation where how that has to be done, if we are to assume that the approach taken by EU is correct, what would practically satisfy the agreement. But coming into the closing aspects, now the other aspect is that how do we exactly allocate responsibilities between different players, right? So we talk about developers in terms of open foundation AI models. Then the first question that arises is that I think it for developers or for people who are involved in the technical aspects of things, I think the key aspect here is to point out what is technically feasible to be disclosed of the various things that could be disclosed between model weights, training data, hardware components, and aspects. That's one. In terms of policymakers, I think it's just striking the balance between what existing legal obligations provide versus what feedback you may get in terms of the technical feasibility from developers on what can actually be disclosed while protecting innovation without compromising existing legal rights. And this is the multi-stakeholder aspect in terms from my perspective. Of course, we've got the geopolitical context, but we're also talking about the different players in the ecosystem who have to cross collaborate, work with each other to sort of find a solution for a proper governance model. So we have the developers on the technical side, we have policymakers who get feedback on existing laws, feedback from technical developers, perhaps identify new areas where you might need certain guardrails or voluntary guidelines. And when we come to the users, uh, you have to be very clear about what you are inheriting and how you are building on top of the foundation model that you've brought in. And finally, whether you take a macro perspective or a macro perspective, larger perspective, or a micro use case specific. I'm done with 5 minutes here. So that's the point, short point. It's not a magic bullet. We have various aspects to consider.
Thank you so much for really summarizing some of those points and the wide array of viewpoints that need to be taken into account, and both technical and from a policy perspective. We are going to move forward. Thank you so much for being with us today, Vibhav. And then we're going to move forward. Our next speaker will be Rudy Shashani. Rudy has a wide experience in information technology field and in the financial sector with over 20 years of experience, which gives him the ability to in aiding organizations. His specialty in ICT governance, compliance strategies, and cybersecurity and digital transformation of fintechs. And Rudy is a certified professional with many achievements and awards, skilled in executive leadership. He has been an active speaker, board member, and coach and mentor for startups. And he is the host and moderator of the DX Talks series, a digital transformation talk show, which has been lately selected as a top 50, and he has been lately selected as a top 50 global thought leader and influencer. Are you?
I'm here.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think just pin your
Perfect.
video and then we'll get you going.
Yeah. Thank you again for this opportunity. And then, discussing today multi-stakeholderism, if I want to call it, an open foundation model is really key of how things are moving, and then how everything is evolving. And inclusivity, I think, at this point of time is a big issue, because we will discover a little bit in a few slides how things are moving, especially in our region. But overall, in general, so we move faster. Unique challenges is really crazy in this open system, where Pam, I love what you presented, part of those graphs from the I think Oxford, if I'm not mistaken, study. Those foundation models are really decentralized frameworks that will really have pivotal role for democratizing AI innovation and enabling this diverse distribution from global economies and addressing those unique needs, if we want to call them, across industries and region. But that open nature sometimes doesn't really fall through in an easy way. It gives us challenges and complexities, especially in governance and accountability and security. And we've seen lately how AI has been used to destroy nations across the world, and what's happening, and then how AI is being used also for unethical behaviors in terms of collecting users' data from government perspective, from private perspective, from different kind of perspectives that we see. So this kind of things hopefully will not be tolerated one way or another, but this is where we need innovators creating those main models, I would say, and using them responsibility in terms of platform complying and helping and being compliant in the regulations, policymakers playing and doing their roles, not abusing their system, also because this is where we're seeing some of the abuse lately, and of course the users themselves trying to be part of this innovation and innovating because we really need empowerment of users. So it plays a pivotal juncture where today collaboration among stakeholders is just a necessity, but a responsibility to all. So if we move into actionable items in terms of how we are moving, or actually challenges at this point of time. Core challenges, I would say, first is the ambiguity in accountability. So who is responsible for that model? We're thankful for, a lot of investments and so on, but in reality, who will be responsible? Balancing openness with protection. It's a very important part of transparency without exposing the vulnerabilities and properties element. Ensuring user trust. This is very important. The rapid evolution versus policy formation. So we have two different things. One is moving super fast, where the policies are sometimes taking some times and lagging. And the decentralization complexity itself, or transparency versus innovation. Sometimes we are faced with different parts of, should we be transparent or should we innovate? But the balance on openness or transparency will hinder the innovation that we have done. And of course, lastly is the user trust. But this is where it comes, one of those challenges is similarly to open models, closed models face the same problems, which is the context, the localization, the history, and the culture. And that's why UAE was one of the leaders, and that's why UAE is on the map today with Falcon and other models, because somehow the culture has changed inside those models. The history has changed. So you cannot change history of a whole population that is a big sum of, a part of the global community, and the localization of the language and so on. So this brought, more help so that we can innovate also locally. But in the same time, it was good for innovation and being part of this global map. And that brings different strategies, if you want to call them, to be able to actionable collaboration. First is, of course, the transparency itself. How can we, talk more openly on those architectures? How can we share ethical considerations from hindering risks? Being ethical by design. So this is early design, not just later on, putting ethics in the end. Collaborating through open communication and so on. There's a big responsibility on the platforms. First, we need to empower nations, because some of the nations, they don't have the power or they don't have the money to pay for the innovation or to pay for compute. So this is where we need them to also do their job, and in the same time provide users with good tools. So they have to provide us with certain things and some, tools, or for some things that are not too technical sometimes. So it can help those users be part and more inclusivity. Policymakers have to really create an adaptive way of regulatory frameworks, try to fix that regulation technology or tech so that it is enabled and it's not outdated. It fosters possibly sandboxing or certain other things to really find those I would say regulations in terms of faster movement. Lastly is the incentivize ethical practices so that everybody is there participating in a good way. And the most important is the user part, the education, the awareness, the awareness campaigns, let them be part of the governance or the voting part or writing the governance part, and most importantly, the feedback loop. That's why cross-stakeholder collaboration is really important. Multilateral forums, shared responsibility agreements, innovation together. So it's really important for the cornerstone of success in this open foundation model by aligning our strengths together, from developers to platforms to policymakers, and most importantly, empowering the user itself. So last slide is building adaptive accountability structures really demands clear responsibility of roles, dynamic frameworks, and most importantly, hopefully, the trust factor and transparency for a global collaboration to encourage cross-border cooperation to really align all of those standards together. So that's it. I think I made my 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you for being part today. fostering collaboration is really open for all for this discussion, and hopefully we can all be part for a better safeguarding of the future of AI itself.
Thank you so much for those comments. And I think it's so important to look, your comments on for platforms and for policymakers to have these adaptable regulations and really be looking and really bringing everybody's perspective to the table. And I think that's been a common theme in the last couple of discussions here today is the idea that not everybody is naturally at this table. And so if we're going to have discussions around open models and decentralized governance mechanisms, that we need to make sure that we are constantly on the lookout for how to make these adaptable, how to bring everybody to the table and how and who those people are. And constantly, it's not something that we can set in stone and then move forward. It's a constant conversation that needs to keep happening, and that the how serious platforms and policymakers are about bringing everybody to the table is maybe another kind of sentiment echoed in the chat right now about about incentives to do this. So we need to find the clear incentives if we want to have this future where we have these open models and some sort of decentralized governance mechanism. We have to make sure everybody's coming to the table. So thank you so much for all of your comments there. Next, we will invite Ankalesh Srivastava. You are here, correct?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Let me do a short introduction and then we will pin your video. So Ankalesh is a strategic privacy advisor with a wealth of experience as a product privacy technology leader in the top 10 in a top 10 large tech company. Over his 19-year journey, he has been at the forefront of innovation across diverse domains, including privacy, fintech, ads, voice assistance, and e-commerce. Passionate about privacy-enhancing technologies, governance, data strategy, ethics, and Gen AI, Ankalesh has driven multi-million-dollar impacts across various product suites, serving billions of customers globally on a large scale. He has volunteered as the chair of the Risks and Control Committee at the Institute of Operational Privacy Design and is an executive volunteer member of the Tejas Cybersecurity Professionals Network, a member of the Washington, D.C. CTO Club, and a senior member of Evanta, which is a Gartner company executive club. And he also has done the MIT Sloan AI implications for business strategy. Thank you so much for joining us. Just a short disclaimer that all of the views and opinions that Ankalesh will be sharing with us today are solely his own and do not represent his employers. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you so much. Today, we are discussing the governance implications of the open foundation AI models and the ways of the cooperation between the multi-stakeholders. How can we make it effective? And it is in the same lines of Vibhav and Trudy that we are going to discuss. So any openness sparks the innovation that we already know, but it also raises the governance challenges. And any decentralized systems lacks a single controlling entity, which is a risk to not only to the society, but also to the overall humanity as well. Right? So that's why there's a shared notion of shared responsibilities among the developers, the platforms, the policymakers, and the users. And when I say developers, for example, if there are any developer who are developing models in companies like Meta, Amazon, Google, what they can do is they can work on reducing the biases. They can work on the interpretabilities. Similarly, the platforms, they can enforce the standards of the documentations. And I see that there are several policymakers in this group as well. We policymakers can enforce the rules for the transparency. And users like you and me, we can always remain open to flag issues. There have been several instances where there is a huge responsibility on users as well. So that's why there is a notion of having the responsibilities in a shared manner as compared to one entity owning everything. Any collaboration builds on the foundation of trust. And in this context, how we can build that trust is some of the examples are the independent audits, and making the model documentation, the open foundation models documentation, we can make it public. And also having some global certification mechanisms for the best practices. So these are the few mechanisms by which we could start thinking to build the trust. And then there is an interesting concept of forming advisory councils of the diverse groups, of course. That includes like policy, tech, civil society. And when I say civil society, it could be anything which is related to human rights or any entity which is underrepresented as well. These advisory councils could set the eligibility criteria as well for who will be having the access to these models, how this data is going to be shared, and they will also do the iterative risk assessment. And based upon the outcome of those assessments, they could revise the safeguards. Now, of course, they are going to influence the revision of safeguards. They themselves are not going to do that, but they could influence them. And these policies that they build, they should not be stagnant. These policies should evolve alongside the technology, because as we saw one of the graph that one person was showing after 2016, the graph was going like this in the technology. The same way the technology is evolving, the policies should also evolve, and it should be based upon the continuous feedback loop from various open source communities. And I believe Rudy also mentioned one interesting topic of these sandboxes, and that is something that piqued my interest as well. How about having a sandbox of doing experimentation in the regulatory framework, which is something that I have never seen. And that's also an interesting concept in terms of the adaptive regulatory approaches. And then how do we ensure that all voices from different corners of the world, they shape standards, and how we can achieve that? We can achieve that by involving, let's say, smaller firms or the researchers from the marginalized communities, some who is sitting far countries, they are underrepresented. If we can involve researchers from those places and then grant them programs. And finally, last but not the least, is about the adaptive accountability, where, as I mentioned earlier, where civil societies can work as a watchdogs who spotlight non-compliance. And when I say civil society, it's human rights organizations or advocates from the consumer side, any kind of community representatives. And there is also another interesting concept of the venue shopping. And let me explain what is that. Venue shopping is practice of choosing the most favorable jurisdiction where we know this case will always win or this case will always be heard. So there are some loopholes. And if we somehow can find out and do the international coordination between all the countries to stop these venue shopping for the weaker regulations. And finally, the transparency in the audits and the reportings and sanctions, so that we can make sure there is a right accountability. So these were my thoughts. Thank you so much for bringing me in. I will be happy to continue listening to the other conversation.
Thank you so much for those thoughts and for joining us today. Yeah, I think a lot of echoing in the comments here, from speakers, that we need to get everybody involved and figure out ways to actually make that happen, right? And to have accountability, and the ideas of regulatory sandboxes and of seeing how the venue shopping is going for where products are launched and where sort of liability will lie as well. I think they're all such complex issues that really need to come together for us to be able to kind of govern in this open way that we're envisioning in this day today. So thank you so much for those comments. We really appreciate you being here and being involved. Next, we will go on to hear some comments from Paolo Maria Gangi, who's an attorney, an EU attorney with a background in IP law, tech law, and business law and has many years working in the Web3 and crypto world. He's an expert and passionate about Web3, DAOs, DeFi, Metaverse, and Paulo has gained substantial professional experience in scams and cyber attacks related to NFTs and crypto assets. So I'd be very, very curious to hear your thoughts, especially we're having these decentralization, conversations, and very happy to have you here today, and looking forward to your thoughts.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for this invitation. This is a very great. Can I speak?
Yes, we can hear you. I think your video is now pinned as well.
Sorry, there was some mess around the Zoom. Sorry. Okay, so thank you for the invitation. Thank you for inviting me to this very, very interesting event. So basically, I'm a European Union lawyer. So first of all, I think it might be interesting to bring what in EU we are doing about AI and foundation model. There are two big pieces of European Union legislation which address this topic, the AI foundation models. So I will start just very quickly describing the EU law about this, but also then I will make a final remark about this. So first of all, we have an AI Act. So the European Union has approved a couple of months ago an AI Act, which will enter into force in August 2026. And the AI Act basically is about products. It's considered the entire philosophy behind the AI Act is that it considers the AI, the artificial intelligence, as a product. So as a product, basically it puts every AI act, AI product, or AI or every kind of product which makes users of AI as in three type of products. One is absolutely forbidden. So from August 2026, some products will be forbidden from the European Union market. The second one is can be sold into the European Union market, but has to basically go to every kind of product of the second type has to go through basically a conformity assessment. And then the third one is can be freely sold. Now, this is the main philosophy behind the AI Act. However, in the same act, there is also a section about general AI model. And this section basically imposes on producers of AI general models some obligation. The most important is about copyright, which is something that Viva was speaking about. And basically, so the producer of AI models that sell these products into the European Union are obliged to basically respect the copyright of third parties. This is, of course, absolutely complicated to comply with, because even in my opinion, even they really don't know in many cases the producer of AI models where really the data set that they use. So it's kind of impossible. But in the European Union AI Act, there is this obligation, and a lot of business associations in the European Union are making, there's a big debate at the moment in the European Union. A lot of associations, for example, Music Producer Association, Artists Association, they are just basically they are just speaking about this rule into the AI Act, saying that the big producer of AI model will have to comply with the copyright laws of the European Union, which, in my opinion, makes everything very much complicated. And the second piece of a European Union law, which has to do with AI, is the privacy law, the GDPR, that I think everyone here will know. there have been a couple of statements from European Union privacy supervising authority, where they basically more or less said that the AI use of privacy data, of personal data from European Union citizens is unlawful, substantial. So in the European Union we have a couple of pieces of law, the AI Act and the GDPR, which addresses heavily, I would say, the AI model from a legal point of view. My personal opinion is that all this legislation in the European Union is just, I will say that it doesn't really make much sense, because all this AI, everything about the Open Foundation AI model should be treated, in my opinion, more at the world level and not at the European Union level. For example, the copyright and the IP stuff should be something addressed by the WIPO, which is the International Organization of Intellectual Property. And it doesn't really make sense that the European Union puts into the AI Act a rule which says that all the AI models should respect the copyright of the European Union citizen, because it's impossible basically to comply with something like this, because all these AI models, as Pax was saying at the beginning of this event, are just global in its DNA. So, in my opinion, all the regulation about AI should be really try to be created at world level, and not at a regional level. Also, I mean, of course, the European Union is a very big, important political bodies. Probably is, I think, the biggest consumer market in the world, but still is not the world. So it should be really something that should be done at world level in an agreement between the big political entities of the world. I think I finished.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Paolo. That was really interesting. Thank you for giving us the breakdown of what's going on in the EU, and also your thoughts on the intellectual property standpoint there as well is very interesting. We are going to go to our final guest for this section, who's Guillermo Hernandez from OECD. He's a policy analyst working on AI at OECD, and we are very thrilled to have you here today with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, and thanks to you for having me with you today. So just a couple quick words for those of you who may not be all that familiar with the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and has as main mission to help build consensus on policy practices for better lives, and do that based on common frameworks and principles. We cover pretty much all areas of policy, with the exception of defense, and we do that on two different levels: gathering data, evidence, and lessons learned, and second, shape international policy standards to improve citizens' lives. As far as we are concerned, at the AI and Emerging Digital Technology Division, which sits within the Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation, we are responsible for undertaking empirical and policy work on AI and emerging digital technologies, and in particular, fostering the implementation of the OECD principles on artificial intelligence. So as part of that work, we are currently conducting a work stream around open source foundation models, and we are trying to flesh out the policy considerations that could contribute to effective governance in that respect. So obviously, as I think has been discussed, there are very significant potential benefits and potential risks. And as these models continue to evolve, it is possible that that balance also evolves. And so We have seen in recent years a number of developers, a number of companies that have started to restrict access, for example, to those models because of fears about potential misuse, proliferation of dangerous capabilities, and so on. So, of course, policymakers are paying an increasing amount of attention to this debate, given the general purpose nature of these foundation models, and the fact that they can be they are dual use technologies. Basically, they can be used for the best as well as for the worst. And so, just to focus on what I understand is the topic of this session, I wanted to give you a bit of a taste of the discussion that has taken place around potential options that could help achieve benefits that are somehow comparable to those that can be obtained by open sourcing AI advanced foundation models in cases where a certain level of restriction in terms of the release of those models may be warranted. So this has to do with the kind of benefits that allow for a redistribution and decentralization of power and control over AI development, the future of AI. And of course, this has implications that are not only of a societal nature, but also a very tangible economic nature, because it also has to do with the value that can be generated and how it is distributed. So, having said that, I just wanted to put on the table to conclude some of the thoughts that have been shared as to the kind of things that can be done in the context that I just described. And I just want to say as a caveat that this does not represent an official position of the OECD or anything like that. It's just part of the discussion that in which we have been participating and that we are trying to foster. So one of the ideas has to do with implementing participatory or deliberative processes to inform high-impact decisions about the development of AI use and governance, including decisions that have to do with model access and potential restrictions. Second idea, institutionalize democratic structures within large labs that develop these models to, again, distribute this control away from unilateral decision-making processes or instances. An additional idea that has been tabled has to do with supporting the appropriate regulatory interventions that may influence somehow developer behavior and guard against regulatory capture. And last, and I think that is also very important, monitor AI-related markets for potential anti-competitive behavior that could be impeding the use of open source models. So I'll stop there. I hope I'm not repeating too many things that have already been discussed, because I couldn't attend the full session. And yeah, thanks again for having me today, and all the best for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Guillermo. And you hit on some of those keywords: power, control, regulatory capture, that actually we haven't heard in those definite terms quite today. And so I really, really appreciate you hitting on those, and that those are some of the key areas that we really need to focus on to be able to, again, sort of realize this vision, right, going forward, that we can have these conversations, we can talk about it, but there are real world power struggles, there are real world implications of trying to implement this kind of model. And I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for sharing that with us. So that brings us to the end. I want to thank for this, not of the event. We have another objective to go after this, but thank you all for all the speakers in this session and participants for engaging in this thoughtful discussion. This session really provided a lot of valuable insights into the complexities of fostering this multi-stakeholder cooperation that we talk about and that we're seeking. And if we're trying to implement open foundation models, this will look a little bit different than it has in the past. And I really appreciate all of the specific nuances and complexities that you have all brought to the table here. And so by exploring some of these strategies for building trust and assigning clear responsibilities, we hope that we can make this a reality. And so as we transition into the next segment, let's carry forward these themes of collaboration, transparency, and accountability. And these ideas shared will really undoubtedly serve as a foundation for continued dialogue around governance and policy. So we are going to take, what time is it? A little less than a 20-minute break and be back here at 50 after the hour, whatever time zone you are in, for the third objective and final objective for today of evaluating open versus closed AI models for effective metaverse governance. So please stay tuned, and thank you all for being here so far. Take a short break and then come back and join us again.
Welcome back, everyone. We will now resume the 5th annual Metaverse Safety Week edition's community lab the third segment, the final segment, which is essentially the Thinkscape session, but it is also a separate subtopic that will be discussed around evaluating open versus closed AI model for effective metaverse governance. My name is Kavya Perlman. I am the founder and CEO of the organizer today, XRSI, and I'll be moderating this segment, the focus on third and last objective of today's community lab, which includes another interactive session conducted with the help of Unanimous AI's novel technology called Thinkscape. Let me now review the focus of this segment, analyze the opportunities and trade-offs presented by open and closed AI models in the metaverse, provide actionable insights into how governance approaches can anticipate risks, support innovation, and ensure ethical and resilient development, focus on practical recommendations to help stakeholders make informed decisions about policy and governance in this rapidly evolving era. To set the context for this, I would like to welcome Noble Ackerson for 10 minutes remarks, and then we will follow that with Thinkscape session to gather practical insights on evaluating open versus closed AI models for effective metaverse governance. Let me just quickly check with Noble. Noble, I did realize that you're here. Yay! Let me just do a quick intro for you. Really glad to have you here. Noble is a veteran full stack product executive at the intersection of data and AI governance, emerging technologies, and human-centered product delivery. Noble's professional career is centered on data ethics and emergent tech, from evangelizing practical data privacy principles to empowering enterprises with the tools to eliminate biases and promote fairness in the machine learning. Noble has pushed the limit of mobile, web, and wearable spatial computing applications in a human-centered way. He has delivered an award-winning solutions for over a decade, from abstract concepts to impactful digital and product solutions. Mr. Ackerson is a certified AI product manager, a Google certified design sprint master, and formerly a Google developer expert for product strategy. But Noble is not focused on product. He's farming, making art, mentoring underrepresented communities, and inspiring technology founders on speaking at technology events. Noble is also a great friend and XRSI advisor. So without further ado, Noble, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Kavya, for the kind introduction. How do I sound?
You sound wonderful, just like the coursework that you put together.
Okay. Yeah. So good news is that I'm here. Bad news is that I have the flu, so I'm not feeling too good, but I did commit to this, so I'm going to power through. And I realized that I made a glaring mistake I'm going to call myself out. I'm living in the future, it sounds like. It's 2024, obviously, and not 25. welcome. Today, I'm going to be contributing to this session, and I was thinking about how to ground it. And so I'm going to we're going to make up a fictional VR world called Hollow Park, and we'll use that to sort of ground the conversation. Hopefully, you can see the balance of open versus closed models and the impacts that has on XR or extended reality trust. And so let's jump right in. I don't need to belabor it. Kavya, you were very kind in your introduction, but I also used to serve as CyberXR's president to make some of these XR experiences a little bit more equitable and inclusive for all. And yeah. All right. So I guess a lot has been said today about this topic, and I guess we might as well just, put a pin in trying to get additional clarity for what open and closed means, as it is pretty vital. So an example of open, as we all know, is Llama's suite of portfolio of open source models. I'm not going to get into what we mean by that level of open, whether it's the data, whether it's the weights. A lot has been talked about there, but for the context of this, for the scope of this conversation, let's call that open. Flux, and a popular image model, that competes with Midjourney, if you're familiar with, is also an open model. Why is it open? It's publicly available. If you go on to popular platforms like Hugging Face or Kaggle, you'll be able to sort of pull down some of these tools. They allow you to, remix or reuse it. If you look at the leaderboard on Hugging Face, you'll notice a lot of these open models are remixed, for whether it's Mistral's series of models or Llama series of models. They're remixed and improved and modified in many ways that the entire community gets to, collaborate on. And because of this, it opens a lot of trust. It's community driven. It's innovative in that sense. It also, because of the open collaboration, sort of exposes a lot of potential security issues that the community sort of and well-known security firms get to scramble on. And arguably, it's I wouldn't call it free, but it is lower cost to operate in some cases if you're looking at sort of token cost and not I'm not talking about operational expenses. So just like the servers that you have to do that. On the other side, it's you've got models that are like the O1 models from OpenAI or Google's Gemini that are proprietary. There's not a lot of insight into how to modify it, and if they do provide those capabilities, it is within the walls of that ecosystem. And it's often very high usability and user experience for what it's worth versus an open model. Um, you know, uh, because we don't have a lens into how these models actually got delivered outside of the white papers that often get released with these. There is a low level of trust, but there's a high level of security. One can argue because it's sort of centralized and robust in the way that any private company would have a fiduciary responsibility to keep. And so we need to keep these definitions in mind. My little fictional Hollow Park story will sort of illustrate the difference between transparency and trust. And I'm going to use the word trust. And I define trust in this context as the transparency that we afford our consumers or our partners to deliver our solutions. the value that we're delivering to our audience or our customers, and the acceptance of any consequences that may happen. So that's how I define trust. Okay. So let's sort of compare and contrast open versus closed in the context of sort of metaverse governance. So say I'm going to use that Hollow Park example. Again, it's not a real company. It's not supposed to be um, sort of mimicking a real world application, but you have this open world metaverse solution that where the strategy is to use an open model. So open models in this context allowed the Holopark team to improve, audit, and correct models that they're using for their solutions, increasing collective trust. And it's transparent. That means they provide the context that about how they use the data. They provide the choices for me and you to consent to using said data or to shed our data. And of course, the controls to revoke consent if we so choose. So that transparency is key. And obviously that comes with some level of a choice. So say, for example, communities can contribute safety filters, share new features, and flag harmful content early on. And so openness empowers, in this hypothetical case, quick community-driven oversight, safety improved, and fostering trust along the way. Now, there are advantages and opportunities for the closed approach as well. Um, in this case, Hollow Park decided to pivot. Let's say they closed off their models. They claimed it would stop abuse. In reality, what that does is it hides problems from public view. That could be strategic, right? Just depending on the context in which this application is being used. But without transparency, harmful behaviors that festered in this tool remain undetected by most unless there's an audit or some regulatory pressure. And, as with any internet connected thing, there's going to be a boom event. So if there is an inevitable issue, trust then plummets quicker with those tools, right? And so by locking the system, our hypothetical Holopark system didn't eliminate the threats per se. They just made it harder for the open community to detect. So I guess I'm going to say here that true safety is not about hiding models. It's about governing them openly. And this is an opinion. Open models risk faster spread of bad content, say, for example, if they're unmanaged, but can be swiftly corrected. Closed models claim control, but can be slow to respond. And you've got your trust factor affected. And obviously that erodes user trust and invites new scrutiny from regulatory pressure to your board and the like. So the trade-off really isn't about whether to allow openness. It's about how to govern openness effectively with closed systems, which I believe closed systems don't really do all of that well. And we've seen OpenAI try different governing structures to try to bring some transparency in there, and they're still trying to figure that out to this day. But to analyze the societal impact of open foundation models, it's very important for us to consider factors such as, that has been talked about today in previous talks. So, effective governance for open models in at least within the bounds of the metaverse should prioritize, in my opinion, transparency, community oversight, open feedback loops, that flywheel, as it were, to further improve. And to do that, we need regular audits by independent experts like myself and my firm to help identify vulnerabilities and ensure compliance with ethical guidelines. We need clear and accessible channels for users to report issues and provide feedback, which is super important for identifying and addressing emerging threats, for example. We need to encourage the development of standards, collaborative development of standards and guidelines for the use of these tools. I believe fosters this sense of shared responsibility, and it promotes ethical AI development. And Yeah, I'm sorry, I went too far ahead, but yeah, if it's open, it can facilitate extensibility or even interoperability, right? By allowing different platforms to utilize and build upon the shared AI framework. We hear a lot about agents, right? And there's a lot of research and applied work into building a protocol for agents, especially when applied to metaverse style applications, to have a protocol to be able to sort of interoperate with across different systems, which brings more value to the system. And of course, how do we measure success? Platforms should define and report, and it should be more open, where we define and report metrics on safety misuse. There are lots of organizations, some of whom are represented at Metaverse this year, and I'm very excited to hear how they help us, how they help sort of shine some light to make our consumers aware when they're interacting with an AI system, to promote transparency and, again, trust, so that they can make informed decisions. We treat them with that level of respect. So I guess this is a call to action. Like, we have to engage policymakers, partner with responsible delivery apparatuses like developers and communities to set the standards. This is not a novel concept. This is already ongoing, but I wanted to reemphasize that meaningful safety requires collective oversight and not secret controls, I don't believe. And so I guess, if there's one thing to take away from this call, let's keep these frameworks and systems accountable and open, without compromising or stymieing innovation, as the EU is often unfairly criticized of doing. I will share some of the works that went into some of this research by sharing the slides with Kavya and Banu, and I'd like to thank the organizing committee here for giving me an opportunity to share 10 minutes of my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Noble. And I'm looking at that list. It's so perfect for our post roundtable report. I'm so sorry you're not feeling well. And ironically, I can relate. It's been the case with me past few days too. But thank you, especially on a Saturday, for making time and so thoughtfully kind of almost encapsulating why almost we are assembled here today, how critical it is to remain open, and what could be the potential downfall or downside if we don't build the next iteration of the internet in the way you already compelled us it should be done. So thank you so much. And so now I'd like to invite everyone who is here now to join our last interactive segment of the lab experience, that is a Thinkscape session. where all of you will join this tool for amplifying collective intelligence through real-time conversations. At any given time, no personal data will be collected beyond what's already permitted, and the aggregate output from this exercise of collective intelligence gathering will be recorded and published in the lab report. So to conduct this session, I would like to welcome Chris Hemsworth from Unanimous AI team to help us with the Thinkscape session. Chris.
Okay, thank you so much. And actually, I just posted a link into chat. And my name is Chris Hornbostel. I'm the Director of Operations at Unanimous AI. Really happy to be here today, and just wanted to kind of really engage in more discussion. And this is going to be an entirely interactive typed chat interaction for the next couple of minutes. If you click that link, you'll be brought onto our Thinkscape platform in a completely anonymous fashion. We use a naming convention that basically assigns a random animal from our database and a random color, sort of like you see with Google Docs. So you'll see people joining as, yellow wolf and blue canary and things like that to keep everyone's identity as anonymous as possible. Today, we're going to jump into our platform that what we do is we solve a couple of problems that you have when you try to have a discussion with a large number of people. And that is you get issues with sometimes the loudest voices can sometimes tend to dominate the discussion. And honestly, sometimes it's just very, very difficult to have a discussion with a large number of people. We facilitated discussions from groups of 8 people on up to groups of almost 400 people. And we do that with our platform, which is called Thinkscape. Think in a little bit, we're going to proceed into some questions, but I'd like to start today, if I could, by showing a brief animated video that kind of explains how Thinkscape works. I'm going to pop that up right onto the Thinkscape platform natively, and I'm going to mute my mic and just let the video itself speak for itself here. My apologies there. I apologize for that. Okay, thank you so much. And just a couple of brief notes before we start with our first question. Everything that Unanimous AI does, from our Swarm platform, which those of you who were on earlier today got to see, and our ThinkScape platform here, which is our newest technology, is based around the idea of human beings are smart, and we try to put AI at the service of human beings so that it works side by side with human beings, because we think that collectively we're all smart as individuals, but we can become super smart when we work together and think together. So what I wanted, a couple of accessibility options we do have. At the bottom of the interface, you will see a small microphone. You can do that if you'd like to try speech to text. Just be sure that you keep your Zoom microphone muted. You can also click the capital A, lowercase a button in the lower right side of the screen. And what that's going to do is it'll just allow you to enlarge or reduce the size of the text as you see fit. So today I would like to proceed to our first question. All of our topics obviously are going to be related to open and closed AI systems and related topics, ethics, risks, and elements within that subject matter. And what we're going to do is we're just going to have a discussion through text here on our platform. I'm going to send everyone to breakout rooms right now, and we're going to discuss our first question. What's the most effective strategy for encouraging stakeholders, individuals, companies, and organizations to prioritize the quality and ethics of data used in AI systems, whether open or closed? And most importantly, why? Uh, we're very big on why on our ThinkScape platform. The reasoning helps us to add support and understand fully why various ideas are so important. And now you'll also see the in each think tank, we have an AI agent, and it's going to summarize and pass ideas back and forth from the two think tanks we have today. And you're welcome to not only discuss the idea of this question, which you'll see at the top of the interface in full, but you can also discuss and debate with the AI agent. Okay, thank you so much for the discussion. Let's do one more question related on the same topic and subject matter. Let's discuss one more question. I'll also send everyone to different breakout rooms. We'll scramble these up a little bit. And our next question is, what is the most effective way to help users, developers, policymakers, and the broader public to understand the privacy risks and social ramifications of the data used in AI systems? And again, why? Okay, thank you so much for the outstanding discussion today. Really appreciate the very insightful responses and appreciate everyone sharing their experience and wisdom with us in this discussion.
Thank you, Chris, for conducting that. And you're absolutely right. We've had a wonderful day full of insights. And this session was, again, another very insightful session. We had Arvind Narayanan, our opening speaker, sharing insights about setting realistic expectations for AI and challenges of addressing harms in open versus closed models, including some geopolitical considerations. Anne Hobson from Meta shared valuable insights from her research in the decentralized governance policy solutions, underlying the importance of keeping the metaverse ecosystem open, which was really, it's delightful to hear that coming from a big tech organization that owns majority of the market share. And Pam Dixon discussed the lack of accepted definition and the social technical impact that needs and the real need for inclusion. Several other speakers we heard from who brought up strategies to enable the metaverse to flourish in this era of open foundation models while supporting innovation and safety, participatory policymaking, ethical by design approaches, transparency, enabling reporting, auditing standards, and accountability principles, and several other things that they brought up during the community discussion. So I know we are a little bit about to go over time, but I would really like to close this with another profound speaker from World Economic Forum. So now let's hear from Daniel. Let me try to say his name, Dobrygoski, for concluding remarks and to wrap up the day. Daniel is head of governance and trust at the World Economic Forum. As a senior leader at the Forum's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, he oversees work on technology, governance, and risk and trust and safety, and digital trust. Daniel also serves as an expert advisor to Global Forum on Technology at OECD, and as a member of the NACD's Blue Ribbon Commission on Board Oversight of Technology. He was a founder of the Forum's Center for Cybersecurity and has been recognized by NACD as one of the most influential experts in corporate governance. Prior to joining the Forum as a Global Leadership Fellow, Daniel practiced law in San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. His expertise in trustworthy technology, elections, and corporate governance has been featured in Harvard Business Review and Wired. Daniel also teaches as an adjunct associate professor at Columbia University School of International Public Affairs. So let me line that up for you.
Hello, my name is Daniel Dobrygoski, and I'm the head of governance and trust for the World Economic Forum. It's great to be here today as part of Metaverse Safety Week, and I'm grateful to XRSI and all the sponsors and supporters of this work for hosting this excellent set of conversations. Let's have one more conversation about good decisions. The theme of this final day of Metaverse Safety Week was integrating open foundation AI models into the metaverse. And that demands that we make good decisions about how and why that integration needs to happen. This is the key to good governance. Governance isn't about any one technology. For example, among other things, I'm a privacy attorney, and that's just one field that's impacted by a variety of technologies. Privacy is absolutely vital in digital communications and in the metaverse. It's something people look for. It's something that people need in order to believe that new technologies are working for them. We encounter a similar issue with AI. Large models require huge troves of data, as you probably know. Access to that data likewise encounters people's demands to ensure that their information is kept private and secure. What I'm saying is that widespread inclusive adoption requires governance structures that respect people's expectations and values. And that's true of privacy, it's true of cybersecurity, it's true of ethical and responsible use, it's true of redressability, auditability, and a host of other areas. And that's why these discussions are vital when we combine new and emerging technologies. What we learn in one space, we can build onto to support governance in another space. That's also why it's so important to talk about open models. Good governance is by no means exclusive to any one technical approach. You can have a closed model that's well governed and an open one that leads to bad outcomes for the majority of people. In a lot of ways, it's not about the tech. It's about our decisions, and it's our decisions that matter. That being said, at the heart of the development of open foundation models is the opportunity for more contributors and more collaborators to scrutinize those models to ensure they're adhering to our expectations about what makes technology trustworthy. And that raises the question, what are we scrutinizing these models for? And what are we integrating them into other technologies to do for us? I'll submit to you that we should have 3 interrelated goals. 1, good security and reliability and safety. 2, effective oversight and accountability over our technologies. And 3, assurances of inclusive, ethical, and responsible use of the technologies we're building and integrating with each other. These are the roots of trustworthy technology. For our purposes, what should grow from those roots are a set of shared commitments. And I'll ask you all to commit to those here. Now, this is just a recording, so while I don't know if you're making these commitments with me, I'll assume you're at least going to think about it. I do hope that based on our discussions today, everyone will go back to their regular work with a renewed or new set of commitments for our use and development of AI, Metaverse, and other related technologies. And I hope they include something like this list I'm about to give you: to protect human rights, to ensure accountability, to develop collaborative safety, to provide for fair ownership of physical and digital assets, to develop responsible data practices, to support education and research into good governance, to promote accessibility, and to protect social, economic, and environmental sustainability. These commitments, or commitments like them, can be the basis for our shared commitment to an open and blended reality. And if you have trouble following along with the ones I just said, it's all spelled out in a recent World Economic Forum publication called Shared Commitments in a Blended Reality. And the point of this whole discussion, and I think a lot of the discussions today, is that good governance matters. And the ethos of open AI models, as well as the technology that we're able to bring to bear using those models, also matters. But overall, more than tech, more than any way to develop tech, your decisions matter. And I hope that these sessions have prepared you to make those good decisions that we need for the future of our connected world. Thanks again for having me. Thanks for joining us and for listening. And I wish you all the best and look forward to collaborating with many of you toward these shared commitments. Thank you.
That was absolutely wonderful. I couldn't agree with this more, the shared commitments and then good decision making. Nandita, I'm with you. It's a beautiful idea. And having a report, what that really details out in terms of shared commitment. So as we conclude today's enriching session, did you want to add? Or I think somebody has the mic open. There. Thank you. So as we conclude today's enriching session on policy and governance implications of open AI and foundation AI models, our heartfelt thank you to each speaker, participant, our community partners, every one of you attending here and sharing your invaluable insights and expertise. Your participation has truly shaped today's discourse. We extend our profound gratitude to Meta, our lead sponsor, for making this event possible. accessible. Our headliner, Unanimous AI. Special thanks to Chris and the Unanimous AI team for their remarkable support through the swarm intelligence exercise and enhancing our collaborative endeavors. All of this couldn't have been possible without all of this collaborative support. Many thanks to Banuji Chaudhary, who has been instrumental throughout this week, making sure everything goes smoothly from the beginning to end, as well as before, making sure that this whole event comes to life. My co-chairs, Nandita Rao, Narla, and Elizabeth Rothman, for helping curate such an impactful agenda for today and bringing together so many experts for sharing their insights. Thanks also, Khalid, for keeping us mindful of the time as we progress. At this moment, I just want to pause and really ask my co-chairs to add any bits about today's, and throughout the week, we've attended the whole week. And so anything you want to add, Liz, for the Metaverse Safety Week or today's session?
I'm just so thankful that everyone joined us today. And this was such a crucial discussion at this point when we globally are in a space of trying to figure out how to regulate AI technologies. And this is something that governments around the world have been wrestling with. Companies are wrestling with this idea of how open should we be with models, with both the architecture of the models and the licensing of the models, and figuring all of these questions out. And I think I'm just so thankful that all of you joined us today and gave your input and your expertise and your efforts in the Swarm AI sessions and your involvement here. And thank you to Kavya and to Banuji and Nandita for your support here as well. And I just want to express my gratitude to everyone for your involvement.
Thank you, Liz, and same, grateful to you as well. Nandita, any parting thoughts? I know you've been really enthusiastic in the chat and keeping everybody engaged, but I really want to hear from you, if anything.
Yeah, I learned a lot today, and I'm so happy that the community came together, all our experts came together to not just focus on the problems, but solutions and what we can do to make things better, and innovative ideas, practical ideas. So there's a lot of good content. I'm looking forward to the report where we can share this out with the broader audience. And thank you to everyone who took time out for their weekends to participate. Incredibly grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Nandita. So as we conclude Metaverse Safety Week, bring it to a close, I really want to express my deepest gratitude to each one of you for your active engagement, thought-provoking insights, and unwavering commitment to building a responsible digital future. The dialogues we've fostered this entire week kind of marks the beginning of a larger movement, a movement to ensure that technologies evolve, they remain grounded in inclusion, ethics, and serve humanity. As one of our long-term advisors, Kathy Bisbee, beautifully reminded us on day one of Metaverse Safety Week, we are the ones we're waiting for. And so it's up to each of us, those who show up, contribute, and act, to turn these conversations now into tangible change, meaningful progress. So as we part today, let's carry forward a message of hope and collaboration. This week may have ended, but our work is far from over. The seeds have been planted here, and we'll keep nurturing them as we progress. We encourage everyone to continue contributing by sharing relevant links and resources at info@XRSI for our comprehensive post-roundtable report. Together, we are forging a path where technology serves humanity with dignity and respect, paving the way for safer, more inclusive metaverse. So thank you again for being a part of this transformative journey. This is just the beginning. Thank you.